time for Under 30, and today we're discussing one that is unique, new holdings of the Cayman Islands. So, Jenny, this is where I'm just going to sit back on this one, I think, and allow you guys to enlighten me as to why this one's got the attention of investors today. Up 8%.
I'm so glad that you are also somewhat unfamiliar because I had to look. It's a digital banking platform. I honestly had heard of it, but never discussed it. I believe this is our first time discussing on the show. So here to perhaps provide more clarity on new holdings, I'd like to welcome in George Tsilis, senior markets correspondent here for the network. So George, analyst activity today, which is obviously driving some upside, but walk us through this stock and sort of what the story is here.
Well, I don't think you've heard of it because this doesn't exist here in the United States. It's a digital bank, but the primary market in which NU serves is actually Brazil. And in fact, they're growing pretty aggressively in other countries in Latin America, like Mexico and Colombia. So if you look at NU Holdings, I kind of look at it as perhaps the SoFi of Brazil when it comes to kind of companies that we're more familiar with here in the United States. But the stock is higher by 35%. Over the last year. It IPO'd in the public U.S. markets in December of 2021, and it's actually made a nice run over the last year associated with a lot of success that this company has actually generated, particularly in the last year or so. Now, if you look at what they do, they provide all sorts of digital banking services, not just to consumers or households, but also to businesses. They've been growing their business banking. If you look at their reported earnings, which were posted in late August, they actually demonstrated 50+% growth in business banking. They also demonstrated total revenues growth by about 62%. And the other thing is, outside of companies like Square, for instance, which is still not profitable on a net income basis, this company is profitable, not just on an adjusted basis, but on a GAAP basis as well. They actually printed about a 6 cent per share adjusted profit last quarter, whereas the expectations were only 3 cents, but that's a turnaround completely from last year where they lost about 6 cents. So this is a company that's actually becoming very popular. If you look at the breakdown in their investor presentation, basically 40% of Brazilians use their services in some capacity, but 27% of Brazilians use NU Holdings as their primary bank. And I think that speaks to tremendous market share as well as popularity as they've been growing, not just in Brazil, but outside of that country where they actually grew their total revenue base and active customer counts by over 30% in Mexico last quarter, year over year.
Yeah, this is really important too, considering from population standpoint. I mean, Brazil is the 7th largest country, so we're not talking about a small market here. George, what if any of these American counterparts that you've talked about, from Block to SoFi, are competing in the same space? And is it good to be compared to a name like SoFi, which has had a little bit more of a rocky road as a publicly traded company?
Yeah, I talked about SoFi as maybe, hey, it's a domestic digital bank that I think a lot of folks are familiar with. That's why I brought it up. But I think if you look at NU Holdings, as well as looking at perhaps even some of the e-commerce players out there like Mercado Libre, symbol MELI, that's really like the Amazon of Brazil and Latin America. What I'm trying to make a point here is that typically speaking, even though maybe Square is available in Brazil, it may not be popular. Just like Amazon is available in Brazil, but it's just not popular. So I think it comes down to maybe a local or cultural preference for specific companies that happen to fit that cultural narrative that's more popular in countries like Brazil or even Latin America. So I think this is essentially a company that's gained market share because it's preferred by its users. Domestic users versus maybe some international competitors. So I think just looking at its market share already and its growth trajectory, which its estimated sales over the next 4 quarters about 73%, I can see why JPMorgan has a $9 price target on the stock, considering the earnings per share estimates for the next 4 quarters is 23 cents, which puts its forward multiple at 31 times, but it's trading around 23 times 2025's earnings. And that's quite low considering the growth rate of the company.
Yeah, and George, just considering the fact this stock is up almost 120% off its lows and up over 80% this year, I mean, really interesting name. And like you said, important to make sure we're looking at names that are popular in other markets, especially internationally. Not everything that's popular here is, of course, popular overseas. So really good look at NU Holdings. Great breakdown. George Tsilis, senior markets correspondent here for the network.